Everybody, and welcome to One Question with Pastor Adam. And it is the first show of the new year. So, hope your 2023 is off to a good start, everybody. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe this here will be a good start for 2023 for the podcast. We will see. We will see. So, it's good to be together. Welcome to the show, everybody. And this is One Question with Pastor Adam. And I'm Adam, and I am pastor to believers and to doubters, to unfaithful Christians and to faithful atheists. And as you all know, you've been watching the show or listening to the show, Jesus was not afraid of questions, and neither are we. So we are here for the questions, my friends. So here we go. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat section. Hi, Jose. Hi, Melanie. Joy is Adam doing this podcast today. Melanie, you're going to make me cry. Melanie is actually an important part of the podcast today, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Hi, Star. Good to see you. So, everybody, I want to tell you just a little bit about next 2 weeks on the show. Next week, I think I'm going to be talking about Christian nationalism. I've got an article coming out that I've been working on for a little bit on Christian nationalism. And Victoria, I'm glad that it is going great. I'm so glad, Victoria. Good. So next week, I'm going to be talking about Christian nationalism. And the week after that, I hope we can still be friends after I tell you the podcast for the next show. 2 weeks from today, I am going to be talking with the author of a book called Paul the Progressive. That is right. Many of you know that I think that Paul is way more progressive than we give him credit for. And I am also a firm believer that progressive Christians have ceded far too much of the Bible to other Christians we have allowed to name the game of what the Bible is about and what Paul is about. And I am not here for that. I am here for something different. Paul is actually radically progressive. He is far more progressive than many Christians today. And so I did a Google search for Paul and progressive and came up with this fantastic book. I bought it and read it right away. It's by Dr. Eric Smith. And his book will be the title of the show of One Question, Paul the Progressive. The subtitle is I can't read the subtitle. It's too small on my app, so I'll bring it up. But anyway, The Compassionate Christian's Guide to Reclaiming the Apostle as an Ally. So let's go. Come on, people. I am here for that. This is going to be great. So that's in 2 weeks. Paul the Progressive. We're going to go over all of the issues that we all have with Paul. And we are going to find that Christianity, Paul, when he says that there is no Jew or Greek, male or female, slave or free in Christ, that he is like expanding the early Christian community right after Jesus. Paul is the one who sends his most important letters, like the letter of Romans, with a woman named Phoebe. We see this in Romans chapter 15 or 16. I think it's 16, the last chapter of Romans. He sends the letter with this woman named Phoebe to the church in Rome. Paul, how we know this is that Paul says, I commend to you Phoebe. That's the first person that he says in this final chapter. And when you commend a letter with someone to another place in first century Roman world, you're sending the letter with this person. And that person has 2 jobs: to get that letter to the destination and to explain the letter in the church. So one of the most important things when it comes to talking about Paul is noticing what he does and how he treats the people around him. He sends this letter to a church with a woman named Phoebe in order to explain it at the church. Phoebe is going to be talking at the church. So, what is up with Paul later on saying, "Oh, women should be silent in church," when he is actively promoting women not being silent in church? I'll give you a little hint. Should I spoil it for you now, or should I make you wait 2 weeks? I won't make you wait 2 weeks. Uh, there is really strong evidence that later Christians added that into that chapter of First Corinthians. Most scholars today. In fact, when I was taking my New Testament course in seminary, my professor at the time was like, read this passage in First Corinthians where it has this thing that women should be silent. Read it and then read the parts around it and see for yourself if it looks like it's been added in. It looks like it's been added in, my professor was saying. And if you read it, you will probably find the same thing. Plus, 3 chapters earlier in Corinthians, Paul is saying that women should prophesy in church. And so women are clearly speaking in church. So I'm giving away way too much of the information for 2 weeks from now, but I'm just wanting you to know how excited I am about this conversation. We're also going to be talking about Paul and how he has been misused for LGBTQ topics. You know, that's a big, I'm wearing it on my shirt and on my collar, you know? So I am here for not allowing many of the Christians today who have co-opted, ooh, I'm just talking and this is coming out of my mouth. Can I get an amen in the chat section? Many Christians today who have co-opted the faith, including co-opted Paul, in order to be misogynistic, anti-homophobic, and I am here to reclaim it. And fortunately, we're going to have a guide who has given a whole lot of his professional career to doing just that in 2 weeks. Chris Smith, Paul the Progressive. If you can read Paul the Progressive, I highly recommend it. It's like shattering to the all of the ways that Christianity has misused Paul in the past. So, okay, but today I was like, should I talk about Paul today? Should I talk about Christian nationalism today? I've done a little bit of both. So we're going to move on from Paul and save that for a little bit from now. But I wanted, since this is the first episode of 2023, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about joy. I know that for some of you, it has been a good start to 2023, and for some of it has been rough. It's been a little rough for me. Might have been a little rough for you. I don't know, but either way, I want to try to help you, encourage you, and if you have ways of helping to do this and encouraging to do this in the chat section, I would love to read those too. How to hold on to, reclaim joy, because religion can often feel like a burden. It can often feel like a weight on our backs. It can feel like something that we have to do in order to get right with God. And if that is what religion is, if it's a weight on our shoulders, if it's like another added responsibility that we have to do, I would rather, I would rather be an atheist. I'll tell you that right now. I would rather not have that religious burden. I would rather not have that God on my back. The 10,000-pound gorilla, the infinitely heavy gorilla of God on my back, right? I mean, where is the joy in that? And I remember being at a Bible study once, and I forget why this person said this, but they said, "You will never find any joy in that book," referring to the Bible. And I was like, oh, why? Why are we even talking about this book if there's no joy, if religion is just this burden? Plus, here's what I always go back to. Jesus in John chapter 15 says this: "I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." Now, I want to get this out of the way. There is a toxic kind of joy. a kind of joy, and I hope you do not hear me saying this. I hope you do not hear me saying, yeah, you might be going through a bad time, but just be joyful, right? That's toxic joy. I hope you don't hear me saying something like, well, whatever you're going through, there's a silver lining to every cloud, right? No, that's not what I'm saying. Jesus says that in John chapter 15 and in John chapter 20, 5 chapters later, he's dead. And there's something that was a turn, wasn't it? See, even as we're talking about this and it's heavy, you can still laugh. That was a big turn. Like joy, and then 5 chapters later, Jesus is dead. Jesus knows that he is going to Jerusalem. He knows that he is causing some good trouble, and he knows that there are going to be consequences. He knows that the religious and political elite establishment are going to be coming after him. And here he is in John chapter 15, saying that he came that we might have joy. Now, I ruined the joke. So 5 minutes early, or like what, 2 minutes earlier, I wanted to say this. I have said these things to you so that you may know that I took on the Father's wrath. And now if you believe in me, then the Father won't be wrathful at you and it'll all be okay. Right? No, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. Jesus says he came and he said these things, that his joy might be in you and your joy might be complete. Jesus came that we might have joy. If you have heard other things about Jesus, why Jesus came to take on the Father's wrath, because the Father is like really pissed off at you. So, that's not joyful. That's a pissed off God who has nothing to do with joy. And I can see how people would like reject that God or just fall under the burden of that kind of wrathful God. What can you do with that? So Jesus doesn't say that he came to take on the wrath of God. He says he came that you might have joy. How do you find joy? One of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this was Jessica says, I learned in positive psychology that intentionally savoring positive experiences can increase our experience of joy. Sharing our positive experiences can also help us prolong our pleasure. Oh, that's getting at it. That is getting at Jesus came that we might have joy. Savor those experiences. You may not have them a whole lot in our lives. Savor them. And this helps us, as Jessica says, prolong our pleasure. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk with you about this is because I have learned many things from many of you about this topic, and also from a surprising place. Many of you know that I am a basketball fan, and I live in Portland, so I'm a Portland Trailblazers fan. And I've been listening to a podcast by Mike Richmond. Shout out to Mike. Mike, at the beginning of the season for the Blazers, we were doing really great. And Mike continued to say, hold on to your joy. We don't know how long this is going to last. Hold on to your joy. And didn't last long, friends. Anybody who's a Blazers fan knows that there's a good reason to hold on to your joy, because this may not last very long at all. So the Blazers are in the worst part of our season. We've lost 8 of the last 10. As if I'm like playing on the team shooting 3-pointers. We wouldn't win any games if I was on the team. But so we've gone through this really bad, awful dry spell. And I'm listening to Mike, and he keeps talking about joy. And I'm like, Mike, I'm not finding any joy in being a Blazer fan right now. So what are you talking about? And he'll end up saying things like there are good things about our team. We have a pretty decent offense. Find your joy. Oh yes, Todd, go Sonics. Let's go. Seattle needs to bring the Sonics back. That would be fantastic. It's a really hard part of the season, and I watch the games. We keep losing, and if you're a fan of a sports team and they keep losing, and you had high hopes at the beginning of the season, like after each loss, there's like, a bit more despair. What's going to be happening here? Maybe I'm too much of a fan. I don't know. But see, that's the despair kicking in, and I'm joking about my despair. No, I want to see the Blazers win. I do. I do. And they keep losing. So Mike will end up saying, how do you hold on to your joy during these moments when it doesn't look good? And here I'm not talking about basketball. And here Mike is not talking about basketball. How do you hold on to joy in these moments when things are not looking good? Mike, in when we are talking about basketball, he will say there are some really good things about this team. We've got some pretty good offense. We've got some pretty good players that can be very fun to watch in certain games and during certain moments of games. They can be very fun to watch. Our defense sucks. Our defense is awful. Uh, so this is not to be toxically positive about the Blazers. And please remember, we're not just talking about the Blazers right now. This is to be honest about life, how hard it is. Remember in John chapter 15, Jesus says, I have said these things to you so that your joy may be complete. And 5 chapters later, he is killed. Jesus is not talking about toxic joy in this passage. He is talking about getting into the dirt, the grime, the injustice, the horrors that the world often brings us, and how, in the midst of all of that, are you able to hold on to some amount of joy? I met Melanie is watching and uh, talked about how joyful it is that we are here. that I'm doing the podcast today. Thank you, Melanie. That means so much to me. Melanie, I will talk with Melanie about hockey because Melanie lives in Rhode Island, loves the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins are apparently having one of the greatest seasons of all time. A couple days ago, Melanie said that the Boston Bruins have the second greatest record at this point in the season in NHL history. And I had no idea because I'm not a hockey fan. I don't think I think I've seen a hockey puck a couple of times in my life as somebody who's lived in Portland all my life. Well, most of my life. I hockey has just never been a big thing for me. But it's a big thing for Melanie. And I get a lot of joy out of talking with Melanie about the Boston Bruins because Melanie lights up. She loves the Boston Bruins. It's a great time for the Boston Bruins. So Melanie's joy for the Boston Bruins is infectious for me because I get to, as difficult it is to be a Portland Trailblazers fan, I love hearing Melanie talk about the Boston Bruins and the joy that she is getting out of watching this team and how great that they are doing. So Melanie says, "Go Bruins!" Come on, Melanie, let's go. So Melanie is able to find joy in in areas of Melanie's life, like the Boston Bruins. And you know, life is hard. Life is really hard right now for so many of us. Our economic situations, family situations. We're going to talk probably more about family situations next week when we talk about Christian nationalism and how that is tearing many of our families apart. Um, in the midst of all of these difficulties in life, how do we find joy? Now, I've mentioned Jesus a couple of times in this passage in John 15, and Jesus gives his advice. And as a Christian, I like to listen to Jesus. I think that's important. Uh, so, what does Jesus say? He says, "I have said these things to you that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete." Well, what has he said to us earlier in John 15? You know what Jesus says. He says stuff like in this passage. Immediately before this, he says, "As the Father has loved me." Now, if that doesn't change your atonement theory of a wrathful God, Jesus continues to say, as the Father has loved me. So I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you, that my joy may be complete in you. And well, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. So here, what is Jesus saying? Jesus, you've heard me talk about unlearning a bit. Maybe I'll do a podcast on unlearning. What Jesus is helping us do is to unlearn this wrathful God who is out to get you. God is the one who loves Jesus because God loves you. That's in the midst of the difficulties, the muck and the mire, the horrors of life. There's a certain joy that we can hold on to in that, to unlearn this God that's against us, this God that's like causing horrible things to happen, in order to see that God is with us in the horrible things that happen, in the trauma, not causing it to happen, but moving through it with us. That's what the Father is doing here with Jesus. And Jesus is finding some joy in that. And Jesus says, as the Father has loved me, so I love you. Jesus is here with the people who are listening to him and the people who listen to him today, abiding in us as we abide in him. That's the language of John, saying that in 5 chapters, I'm going to die. They're going to kill me because life is hard. Sometimes people turn against us. And in the midst of that, how Jesus is asking, how can we form a community of mutual giving and receiving in the spirit of love? Throughout the Gospels, that's what Jesus shows us God is. The one who comes to us through this person, Jesus, and seeks to heal us from beginning to end in Jesus's ministry. He's performing these miracles of not of shaming people, pointing his finger at people who are sick or people who are poor. He's out there healing people for free, feeding people for free, saying that if you want to find him in this world, that you will find him in the poor, the weak, the hungry, the thirsty, the sick. And how do we respond to Jesus in this world? He says that if you keep my commandments. Now, remember in the Gospel of John, Jesus does give us commandments. He says, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Maybe in the extreme difficulties of life, oftentimes we feel so alone. And maybe in those extreme difficulties of life, we might be able to find joy by recognizing that we're not alone, that there are other people on the journey with us. Sometimes we may need to reach out for a little bit of help. People come to Jesus. There's this one story. I love this story. There's this one story of this man who's paralyzed, and his friends bring him to Jesus, and Jesus is in a house, and it's just crowded, and they cut a hole through the roof, and they like send their friend down. They must have had like ropes or something to like drop their friend down. And Jesus says that his friend's faith has made the man well again. It brings the man life. There's these healing stories are always complicated, right? Like, does the man get up and walk and stuff? What happens here? The important thing here is that this man is treated and cared for by Jesus. He's treated and cared for by his friends, and in this moment, this love that his friends are showing him, that Jesus is showing him, it's all showing him that he's not alone in his pain. That yes, there is real pain in this world, and we all go through it. And in the midst of that real pain, there might be people who pick us up when we are lying on the mat, who pick us up, carry us along the way. Maybe you're feeling like the man who was paralyzed, all alone, nobody cares. And maybe there is somebody there to help you pick up the mat. And maybe there's joy in that. Maybe there's joy in recognizing that we're not alone and that there are other people in this world too, to love us along the way, and that we can love along the way too. Oh, Luke says, Judas, you Judas. So Judas, oh man, this is part of the joy too. This is part of the joy too, because Judas, we are all I have a great I've developed great sympathy for Judas, and one of the great things about Judas is that he is there when Jesus says, I love one another as I have loved you. That's where in the Gospel of John, Jesus feeds his disciples, the Lord's Supper, and Judas is there. Somehow Jesus in the Gospel of John knows what Judas is about to do, and guess what? Jesus feeds him too. Jesus feeds the one who betrays him, Judas. And remember, all of the disciples in that room are about to abandon him. And what does Jesus do? He doesn't shake his finger at them. He feeds them nourishment for the journey, because the ways in which we abandon one another, betray one another, the ways in which we abandon and betray God don't have the last word. Jesus gives us spiritual sustenance, food, because there's something going to be happening after that that we need to be sustained for, because betrayal, abandonment don't have the last word. Oh, Judas, bring me some Judas. So Luke says, heal me for free. If we were a Christian nation, we'll get more to this next week. There would be Christian nationalists. We're going to find next week want power, not the power to do what Jesus did, heal people, provide food for people in need. But if, Marjorie Taylor Greene said we should be a Christian nation, if by that she meant healing people for free and making sure that everybody is fed and housed, I'd be like, all for it. Let's go. But no, that's not what they mean. So heal me for free. Yeah. Luke also says, when I got so high, I had a panic attack. Having a friend to call was life-saving in a sense. Luke, I am so glad that you had that friend. I am so glad. I'm just so glad that you're here, Luke. You mean a lot to me and to all of us. Star says, I'm a Leafs fan myself. Star, I have no idea how the Leafs are doing. Somebody tell me how the Toronto Maple Leafs are doing. I would love to know. But no matter how the Leafs are doing, maybe they're having a hard season like the Blazers, and they've got a bad defense, but a good offense, and we can hold on to our joy with the Leafs offense. I have no idea. I don't know. Lots of hockey in Minnesota, Luke says, but I don't like hockey. Playing street hockey is fun though. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So yeah, Todd, I am still rooting for the Sonics to be back in Seattle. I grew up when the Sonics were in Seattle, and watching Gary Payton and Sean Kemp and Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter play was some of the highlights of my growing up. So all right. So what else on joy? Anything else on joy? I mean, I guess my message today is, Toronto Maple Leafs not doing well. I'm so sorry, Star. It's like the Blazers, Star. We can commiserate knowing that we are not alone together, and we are not alone. We are together with really bad sports teams, and there's a certain joy we can find in being together, Star. So there we go. That's the message for today. So throughout 2023, there are going to be ups and downs. I have experienced some ups and some downs, some pretty big downs, some pretty good ups. And how do we hold on to our joy in the midst of it? That's that's one of the keys that I am going to have in 2023. So Todd says, yes, I was 9 years old in 1967 when the Sonics were born. Ah, let's bring the Sonics back to the Northwest, Todd. I would love that. So holding on to joy. That's a theme in my favorite sports podcast that's helping me. Maybe it'll be a theme this year on the One Question podcast. How do you hold on to your joy, not in a toxic way, but in the way that Jesus is talking about in the midst of difficulties of life? How do we live in community with one another? How do we form a community? How do we create a community? It's got to be intentional in a way where we are here to love one another as Jesus has loved us, and in that we can find some joy. So friends, joy can be found in the practice of gratitude. Yes, Denise, I love it. I love it. Practicing gratitude, being grateful for the good things, not denying the bad things, right? Not denying that life is hard. Life is often very, very hard, and practicing gratitude for the people around us who give us joy, who are with us in the midst of pain. There's this one story that I sometimes like to tell about this. It was when I was being a hospital chaplain, and so many stories from chaplaincy that are just powerful and amazing in the midst of the horrors of life, and how joy can spring up in the midst of these really difficult moments. There was this one mother and daughter. They must have been in the mother must have been in her 50s or 60s. She was the wife of a man who had had a massive heart attack, didn't see it coming. And he was on life support. I don't know if he survived, but the mother, sitting there with her daughter, talked with her for a while, and she said, she ended up telling me a story about how she was at a theme park here in Oregon, in Salem. What's that theme park called? Anyway, it doesn't matter. She was at that theme park, and there's this haunted house in the theme park, and it's dark, and it was super crowded, and she was there with her daughter very early on, and she was walking through the haunted house, and there was this huge line, and her daughter starts screaming at how toddlers can scream when they're really scared. And she was trying to go backwards, back out through the entrance, and she couldn't, because it was too crowded. There were too many people there, and she couldn't get her way back. But there was somebody who was working at the theme park was in there, and the lady says to the man who's working in the theme park, "Hey, how can I get out of here? I got to go back." And the man says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, the only way out is through." And she looked at me in this horror of a situation when her husband may be dying. And she told me this story, and she says, the only way out is through. And it's hard to find joy in the midst of that kind of pain, that kind of uncertainty about what's happening, joy in the face of death. And I think that's what Jesus is kind of giving us here in John chapter 15, this kind of, I don't know, sense of you have to go through it. And this lady knew that she was not alone. Her daughter, who had been in this experience with her 20 years earlier or so, they'd been through this kind of darkness before, and they're going through it again, and they were going through it together. And maybe in that kind of sense, when you're in that kind of darkness, that kind of pain, recognizing, as Denise says, Denise, Enchanted Forest, thank you. Why couldn't I think of that? When you're going through that kind of pain and you're in the darkness of the haunted house at Enchanted Forest, you're not alone. There's a guide there who says, I'm sorry you have to go through. And there's somebody to guide you through. There are other people around. When you're in the hospital, going through one of the most painful experiences of your life, not knowing if your spouse is going to make it through, you know that the only way out is through. And no matter what happens, you're not going to be alone, and that there will be people there to love us through it. Maybe there's a certain kind of joy in that. Laura says, South Dakota State University Jackrabbit football team won their first national championship on Sunday. I think I was talking with Laura. We were talking earlier this week, and I think this was the first Jackrabbit football team national win. So congratulations, Laura. Hold on to that joy. Who knows what next season is going to bring? So whatever it brings, I hope you're able to hold on to the joy of this championship and whatever next season brings to you. So, friends, that's what I got on joy. Some people say like there's a difference between joy and happiness. I don't know if this works for you, but they will say that happiness is something that happens periodically. And it's based on external things that happen. The Blazers winning the championship, right? That would make me so happy. But joy for many people is something different. It's like a disposition. It's like when Denise says joy can be found in the practice of gratitude. Maybe for some people, joy is a practice. It's when you're in the midst of it, you may not be happy, right? In the midst of Jesus going to the cross, he's not always happy. Jesus also feels abandoned when he is on the cross. This is tough. This can be really tough, but there might be some kind of a practice of joy that doesn't say bad things don't happen, or it doesn't just paper over the bad things, but maybe a sense of joy could be the bad things don't have the final word. You see, in that kind of joy, in that practice of joy, there's a bit of defiance. Right? There's a bit of defiance. There's a staring, like when that woman is there and her husband may be dying. There's a bit of defiance in what she is saying. That this does not have the last. I'm not going to let this have the last word in my life. There is something more. There is something at the end of this. Christian spiritual language calls it the resurrection. Jesus is able to trust that even in the midst of the horrors that happen in life, there doesn't have the last word. There's something beyond this. Whether Jesus knew what that was or not, or if he just knew that God's love is more powerful than all of the other stuff that happens, that might be where he was able to hold on to his joy. And it might be where we are able to hold on to our joy too. So, Denise, thank you for Enchanted Forest. That's awesome. My dog is snoring right now. You might be able to hear him. That's adorable. Should I show you my dog if you're watching? Yeah, I'll show you my dog because this. Oh, now he stopped snoring. Mac. Oh, right when he was like he was snoring, and then I showed him to you and he stopped snoring. So anyway, friends, yeah, joy in a dog snoring. That's pretty good too. So anyway, friends, hope you enjoyed this episode. You can keep up with One Question with Pastor Adam wherever you watch podcasts. If you watch on iTunes, if you could leave me a review, 5-star review, and a nice comment, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh, my children last year got me this mug. This gives me joy too. It's Darth Vader. I'm also not just a basketball fan, I'm a Star Wars fan. And they got me a Darth Vader mug that says, "I like my coffee on the dark side." Yeah, how about that? Little Darth Vader right there. I love it. So always gives me a chuckle when I see that. So anyway, friends, thank you for being here. And we will do this all again next week here on the Clackamas United Church of Christ Facebook page and YouTube channel. And we're going to talk about Christian nationalism. So if you got any questions on Christian nationalism, feel free to send them my way. Thank you for being here. Always a joy to be here together, to read your comments, and thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to 2023. Star, thank you Thank you. Blessings to everyone. And I'm looking forward to more podcasts in 2023. So until next week, God be with you, friends. Take care.